And on that wonderful note, ladies and gentlemen, let's quickly march ahead because we're going back to back with the fireside chats that we have planned for all of you. And this time, we're talking about building global brands from India. Joining us, we have a seasoned entrepreneur who's also known to create innovative and profitable businesses. And he's someone who's always on a mission to power intelligent, mobile-first experiences. We have with us none other than Mr. Abhay Singhal, who's the co-founder of InMobi. And to extract the right answers, it's only befitting that we have with us none other than Anushree Bhattacharyya, Editor, Brand Marketing and Education, FE Digital, The Financial Express. So ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about building global brands from India. Can we have a beautiful round of applause? Lots of insights flowing in from this side of the stage. So let's keep that energy going. And I'm going to quickly hand it over to you, Anushree.
Thank you. Hi, Abhay. Hi, so the first question of building global brands from India, Amrit Kal, like they say. InMobi is an international company now, you have a lot of presence. In India, we have seen startups coming up, mushrooming, then dying, then coming up, somewhere going in some strange international market, then coming back, then fizzling. So what is the secret sauce to building an international company?
Thank you for having us here. InMobi has been there for about 15 years now, so we've sort of built this business over last decade and a half, and a fairly global business in some sense. So I have probably a couple of things to say on that front. One is that I guess every entrepreneur needs to play a very, very long game. If you're starting a startup, you need to, and this, I didn't know that when I was starting, so this is sort of my last 15 years of journey, is that you have to always assume that this is how you're going to live forever, for the rest of your life, and then only this whole long game comes into the picture. There's a very beautiful book called Infinite Game that I think we all should read. That book talks about the beauty is in compounding and not in achieving any specific outcome. So that's one. Second, I believe, and this is true for whether it's an Indian startup or a global startup or a Israeli startup, the unit economics have to be always profitable. If the business is not, I think we have taken that, we've misinterpreted the availability of funding as messing up the unit economics of the business. Funding is there to fund your operations. Funding is not there to fund the gap in the unit economics of the business. So that, I believe, is the second thing. And in my view, the third big thing is India of today, unlike India of 15 years ago, but India of today has all three components. It has exposure to the global market. It has the confidence of having done things, or is, exuberance of youth, that are capability of being able to do something. And lastly is what I say is our secret sauce, which is Indian mindset. These three things come together can help us make, I believe, any global business. So that's what I guess we've done.
Interesting, but if I come to the present now, when COVID happened, of course, it was a calamity. We saw a lot of loss of life. What we also saw that digital businesses got a boom to the extent that they hired, and now all we read these days in news is about layoffs and firings and how they're trying to rationalize their business. So now that the high tide is gone, how do you see these businesses can rationalize? What are the ways of rationalizing? Of course, the cut of a manpower cost is perhaps one way, but besides that?
So COVID definitely gave boost to a lot of businesses, and a lot of companies made the mistake of understanding what is happening in COVID as the new normal. It of course is not. I mean, we are all sitting in this room is a function of COVID not being there. So definitely there is some rationalization which is going on in the world. We've gone from great resignation to great layoffs in probably less than 12 months. We probably are not understanding this. 12 months ago, most of the CEOs in the room were having a struggle about how to hire. HR conferences were through the roof. How do we hire people? How do we retain our people? We can't retain anyone out there in the organization. And the tide has swung, I guess, in probably less than 8 months from this bucket to that bucket. So my view is that these are all, these are all cycles of the startup. Somebody really intelligent once said that what Silicon Valley went through in 25, 30 years, India is going to go through in probably less than 10 years. So our cycles are going to be compressed. We're going to see the funding highs of 2020 and 2021, and then we're going to see the funding lows of 2022 and 2023, and then we're going to see again resurrection probably in 24, 25. But one thing that is going to happen is I think the entrepreneurs after this are going to be way more resilient, way more measured in their approach, and for sure they'll be looking at how to build the businesses with the right unit economics. So those are, I believe, the three things that would phenomenally then bring a different perspective to the whole Indian entrepreneur ecosystem.
Do you think the unit economics also will come into play because of the fact that the funding has dried up to a certain extent? Not to mention the Chinese investors are out of the country now. A lot of the companies which of late went IPO were initially Chinese funded companies. That's one way of looking at it, but when these startups go for IPO, and of late we have seen some really skyrocketing valuation that have been claimed, you think before going for IPO, these businesses really need to think hard, because while you are blowing up investors' money, when you do the IPO, you are blowing up a consumer's money. That's a huge of a difference.
For sure. I think every entrepreneur needs to be a lot more responsible whenever we raise capital. Whenever we raise capital, I think our responsibility index has to go up multi-folds. If it is public's money, then I think it has to be even more responsibility. But I would like to correct you one thing there, Anushree. There is more money in the market than what market knows what to do with. There is way more money in the market. It's every fund out there is sitting with huge amount of raises that they have done in the last 2-3 years. There are close to about 200 to 300 different angel funds that are operating in India right now that are willing to invest in every young startup at this point in time. So if you look at just from a macro picture perspective, this is probably the best time that India has ever been in the last 10-15 years from the availability of the capital perspective, ever. But yes, the big checks are missing. Big checks are missing because the big guys that are investing, 200 million, 300 million, 400 million kind of checks, they're all demanding a lot more about the accountability. They're all demanding a lot more about unit economics and real businesses. So I would say that if you're an early stage entrepreneur at this point in time, it's probably the best time that it has ever been. There are way too many angel funds out there that are looking to invest early stage ideas. Yes, they won't invest now in PPT. They're going to be looking at some non-zero business for you to be investing in. But probably that's the best way to invest in right now.
Actually, that was going to be my next question, that investing in PPT versus investing in reality. If there's so much of funds available, we aren't seeing that money actively flowing in, because investors now are cautious than ever, right? If I'm not mistaken. They would really like to see a business happening. But isn't that a catch-22 situation? Because when I get an angel funding, it's mostly based on promises than delivery.
I like the way you said dream versus reality. Startups are, as they say, reality happened 2 times in the world, once in the dream and other time in the real world. And entrepreneurs typically make that possible. So I don't know when you say, investors invest in dream versus reality. But investors are definitely more cautious about looking at, investors are definitely more cautious about looking at things that are able to show some sort of proof point, which they were otherwise not able to do so before. Which brings to another point, that there is this whole group of angel rounds that have now started. In fact, some of the entrepreneurs that built the first generation businesses have actually come together and have started investing a lot into very, very early stage companies. It's not just the professional funds that are investing in early stage businesses. It's even the early entrepreneurs that have made somewhat success are also coming back and investing into the business. So my view is that it's a good time for you to be building the business. It is good time for you to be asking the tough questions as to why you are building the business. And it is a good time for you to be showing some proof point before you go and jump into it. I think it's going to be good for you as a person only at the end of the day, before you raise capital and then, you know, bring upon a lot more pressure on yourself than not.
Right. So over the years, we have seen many kind of businesses. I'll give an example. In the last 1 or 2 years, I've seen rise of what you call the D2C brands, which eventually do not remain D2C, because when it comes to distribution, you have to be available everywhere. And the cost of just sending a product from your own website to the consumer is where your CAC shoots up off the roof, right? So now also we have businesses where there's a combination of advertising revenue versus other revenues. So when a business starts, what are the kind of, you think it's better to have 3 revenue streams at any given point in time, as like A, B or C? So if A shuts, I have B, B shuts, I have C. Or because I have seen startups endlessly pivoting, and that's what I was talking to you about. That's an area of concern.
You know, it's very interesting that you say, if A fails, then B, if B fails, then C. That's where the capital goes, actually. To build the fail-safe models, that is where you end up, you know, building the, you know, whatever, B and C and D and E and F. My view is that it's, you know, should you have multiple different business models? Yes. If your capital situation and cap table allows you to do so, by all means do that. But one of the other big challenge is, and this we've seen this across the world, is most of the successful companies have been misinterpreted in their first 4 to 5 years. People, I mean, in fact, this is a barometer that we use internally, that if any one of the idea that you are proposing, if that idea is not being shot down by at least 70 to 80% of the people in the room by saying either it's too illogical, either it is too wrong, either it is too big or whatever, it's not a good enough idea. Because if the world believes in what you are trying to do, then that means it has already been done. The story has been over. So if the story is over, then why go after that story? So that's a story of the D2C brand. I mean, the first few D2C brands were massively successful. Then came all Me Too's. And my point is that distribution cost is only going to go up. It is not going to go down. So if you are building another D2C brand, no matter how good your brand may be, but the distribution cost has already gone up. So when you're building a D2C brand, did you ask yourself the question, what is that different that I am doing that will make my D2C brand successful? So my view is that chasing a successful idea is a wrong thing. Like, you should stop right there. Chasing a successful business idea will only bring more pain and sorrow in the end, because when that business idea became successful, it was a misinterpreted idea. We know the stories of Uber, and we know the story of Airbnb, and we know the story of, I mean, InMobi is the same. We have a story of Glance right now. World does not understand what we are doing, and that's perfectly fine, because if the world understood what we were doing, then we won't be the only one that will be doing it. So that's, I think, my take on that question, and how do you interpret that?
Interesting. Speaking of Glance, I'll touch upon digital advertising, sure, because we're talking about digital brands. One way is, of course, you advertise about your brand, but in a market like India, when it comes to building brand, it is believed the traditional way still ensures that you build your brand. For many startups, that's an affordability question. But many startups, that also is a question that a user may not trust your brand that easily. So where does this entire game of advertising resides? Because what they forget is this is also the cost of customer acquisition. Do they have real-time data? Do they know what the consumer want? are they able to read the customer's mind, the purchase power which you said is going to take 9 to 10 years for that to mature? Or is everyone just in a haze right now to, haste to build another brand and then sell it off to the HOs or the ITCs of the world?
I mean, I have little less exposure to the D2C and how they are selling to the HULs and the ITCs of the world. That's not a space that I operate in. But almost every one of those companies advertises on InMobi. So I certainly am beneficiary of huge funds that they have raised in the past because they ultimately come to us for distribution, and we are able to get them or their message in front of their potential customers. So my own take on that is, actually, what was the question? Sorry,
I'm saying advertising versus real brand. How much should you cap it when you spend on advertising?
Look, I think most of the large companies, and we work with even the likes of Amazons and Googles and Facebooks and so on, so Apple now. If I were to tell you that Amazon's global advertising budget is about $13 billion, that's more than Hindustan Unilever or P&G individually. Google's advertising budget is about $7 to $8 billion. This is a company that everybody knows in the world. Facebook's budget is very similar, and Apple's budget is very, very similar. So advertising and brand building have a very strong correlation. You can't ignore that. But then again, it's like, prove to yourself that advertising is the only problem that is remaining to be solved. If you have fundamentally cracked the unit economics problem, and if the only problem that is left is the distribution problem, then yes, advertising works. But distribution isn't going to help solve the unit economics problem. Distribution or putting money behind distribution actually makes the unit economics worse. It does not make unit economics better. So fundamentally, that's why, we build a very large B2C business in the form of Glance. Here is an interesting stat that I'll give you. It's a very interesting stat. There are close to about 2 million apps in the App Store. About 2 million apps, Android or iOS, give or take a few, 2 million apps, of which 1.9 million apps are what they call as zombie apps. Those apps haven't been updated in the last 2 years. About 1.8 of them are called as super zombie apps, which means they've not been updated in the last 5 years at all. Which basically means is that it's very easy to create an app and put it in the App Store, but the problem is actually distribution. And if you get the distribution, then the second problem is getting the app to open. Because if a consumer isn't going to open your app, then how are you going to get the engagement done? So I think somewhere the battle is not about throwing money at advertising and creating a brand. The battle is to be able to create a product that consumers are opening, consumers are able to recall, and then you throw money behind advertising to make it bigger and widely available and distributed.
If you see the Indian market now in the terms of the kind of startups that have come up, which space do you think is left for them to get in and make a real successful case study out of it? Because what happens is, like you said, there is 1 or 2 successful case, and then there's a herd of or a barrage of people who enter that space. But according to you, which are the areas which are still not touched or not have been kind of dwelled into properly by startups in India?
Oh, and I'm super passionate about this topic. There are a lot of India-centric problems, hard problems, and I think not many entrepreneurs are touching those problems. Infrastructure and sanitation and education and tons of those problems that nobody is touching on it. But one very interesting space that I'm personally very, very passionate about is there are actually no successful global B2C startup that has come out of India. Not even one. 1 in 4 successful SaaS startups in the US are started by Indians. Now we all know about Indian CEOs sitting right on the top of so many different companies. One should ask ourselves this question as to why there can't be a successful B2C startup that can come out of India and take over the world. There are I mean, UPI is a great B2C success story. And UPI is going to go global at some point in time. ONDC we are trying right now in India, and ONDC may also go global. So this whole confidence of build for India, but take over the world is an area that I'm generally, personally very, very, very passionate about. And before, I know I'm digressing on this, but before TikTok became so globally successful, everybody thought that only B2C companies can come out of that 20 square mile area of Mountain View and Palo Alto and so on and so forth. And TikTok proved to the world that they can give massive kick up the backside for all of these companies. So why not the startups coming out of India?
Interesting. In the next 1 or 2 years, how do you see the Indian consumers' behavior, purchase pattern, purchase power changing so that startups are able to move in with time? I think the problem is that they think the consumer moves much faster than they assume she would move, or they're not able to play catch up, or they move faster. Right? It's a weird situation that they're not able to read the mentality of the Indian consumer.
Yeah, no, I think, and I was talking, behind in the stage, that every startup is overestimating how much Indian consumers are going to expand in terms of their purchasing power. I mean, somebody had printed out this number that roughly for the kind of food delivery startups and the taxi companies and fintech companies, typical Indian audience base is about 10 million, and they're now looking to expand it from whatever 10 million to 100 million. Give or take anybody's point of view, I actually think that is probably going to take anywhere between 10 to 15 years. It's not going to happen in the next 2 to 3 years. Doesn't matter how much money you can throw behind it, doesn't matter how much you push this thing to happen. Some things are law of gravity. You can't beat the GDP of the country. The country has to sustainably grow at that 7-8% for the good next 10 years for the new trillions of dollars of value to be created. So my view is, I don't think there is anything wrong in how people are reading the Indian consumers. I think we are all reading the Indian consumers very well. They are very aspirational. They're very, very aware. They are very informed. They want access to the global things. They want access to conveniences. I think we are reading those correct. But what we are probably not reading correct is that their ability to pay for these things and how quickly that ability is going to grow. And that, in my view, is going to take time. So there's no way you can shortchange that. It is what it is. It is what it will take time.
We have about 3.5 minutes. Anyone who wants to ask a question, please raise your hand and quickly introduce yourself and just keep to the question, please. Is there anyone? No, I think they are not facing any challenge. What is the next big challenge that's going to hit the Silicon Valley?
What is the next big challenge?
Challenge that's going to hit the Silicon Valley.
I think Silicon Valley's challenge is, their own euphorism. They think that the world sort of surrounds around that place in some sense. And I think they're probably beaten to it. The way TikTok has really crushed their soul in the last 3-4 years, it has given a lot of shock to that companies in that space. Other than fundamentally the real estate problem, talent problem, all those kind of things. But fundamentally, I think Silicon Valley has become too comfortable a place where people are not willing to slog as hard. Entrepreneurs or the early stage employees are looking for a lot more conveniences in life. And they think that the world around them is what the rest of the world is. And that, I believe, is a big thing that is going to make a difference in Silicon Valley. And you look at the example of great companies like Google. I mean, when Google had to make itself successful in India, it had to actually launch products for India. Yeah. Not take the US products and bring them to India, launch products for India. And that's what I think some of the successful companies will have to do if they have to become global.
Yes, please. Can you have a mic for the gentleman, please? I can't see her actually. Yeah, so sorry. Please.
Hello.
introduce.
Hello, Abhay sir. Hello, Anushree ma'am. I went through all of the stocks that were going through. You talked about the angel investors who are not only investing on the startups but on the entrepreneurs as well. I have started my company in the month of December. I am the recipient of Women Entrepreneur of the Year.
Ma'am, could you please ask the question, please, because there's someone else also
Yeah,
waiting.
so I just want to know the criteria that they look after when they are actually ready to invest in very early startups as well. So what are the set of criteria that we need to have to go for an investment from the angel investors?
So my take is that if I'm going to be investing in a very, very early stage startup, probably on a PPT or just on a prototype, I'm actually looking for a very, very, very strong recommendation. Either I would have worked with that person directly or indirectly, or I know somebody who has worked with that person directly or indirectly, and that person is also putting their money. That's the simple most criteria. The idea is important, but more than the idea at that point in time, I'm looking at what metal you are made of. And that can only come by looking at when somebody else has seen you operate for some period of time.
Sure.
Okay.
To this sir in the front row. So you can just say, I think we can hear you.
Hi, Abhay. I'm the founder and CEO of Explorer. It's a social media app for travelers, made in India for the world, as you were telling. Just a quick question. InMobi, do you also cater to user acquisition outside India? That's one. Any case study? Second, in India, what kind of market share does InMobi has in terms of marketing? You were talking about big numbers now, big companies, Facebook, Google. What's the market share, seeing all the competitors here in India, which InMobi has in advertising, especially on the mobile app side? Thank you.
So I'll take the second question first. In India, we are sitting at low double-digit percentages in terms of the overall market share of the India's digital advertising market. So we're decently large in terms of how the Indian overall advertising market is. And to answer your question about globally, yes, of course. I mean, we cater to significant share of user acquisition budget for every company that wants to go global in India, or even if they're sitting in the US and they're advertising. Like one of my largest customer right now is Nike, sitting out of the US. And for those of you who may not be aware, now Nike sells 40% of their shoes through their mobile app. It's a fantastic case study. You should read that up and see how they have been growing over the last few years. So yeah, I mean, we work with a lot of global brands.
Thank you so much. We'll take some of the questions offline. Time's up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much indeed, Abhay, and thank you, Anushree. I think that was a masterclass, if I may put it that way. Thank you so much. And if you could again share the name of the book, a couple of our audience members were asking the name of the book that you recommended.
So it's called Infinite Game.
Infinite.
It's a simple promise that says that the game will never be over. It's a game that goes on and on and on. And that's how I think we should also sort of, build our own startup. So it's called Infinite Game.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much again. Thank you very much. If I could request both of you to step forward for a quick photo op. Just one last final drill. That's about it.